given for justice. May I know from the government, have the Janyodharus and the Savarnas ever faced untouchability, oppression, discrimination, encounters, police beatings, dropout, lower number of people in graduates? These are all traits which are found, unfortunately, in our country, in Dalits, SCs, and in the caste of the Muslim community. Madam, my fifth point is, this exercise is fraught with impropriety since there is no evidence of empirical data. Please show us empirical data of these Savarna people, forward caste people, their backwardness. Where is the empirical evidence? Okay. Madam, the empirical evidence is found where? In Sachar Committee, Mishra Commission, Kundu Committee in 2011 census, lowest literacy rate Muslims, lowest people in schools Muslims, highest dropout rate Muslims, lowest number of people in graduation. Madam, my sixth point to you is that, why I say this is a burden on states. My state, Telangana, have passed an act asking for 10% reservation for the caste among Muslims and 12% for STs. That was backed by empirical evidence. Empirical evidence. You refused it for last 6 months. My last point, may I know from the government, what will happen to the Maratha reservation? Are you going to give the Marathas reservation under this economic backward, whatever it is? This is a fraud on constitution, madam. That is why I say that in Article 15 and 16, and last, my seventh point, madam, in 15 and 16, there is no way you can put in economic backwardness. And if you are so serious about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, I challenge you. What about 1950 presidential order? Yes. Isn't that violation of right to equality? Isn't that violation of Article 21? Okay. That is why I say you are playing a fraud on constitution. It is an insult to Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and you cannot pass this bill in the courts of law. This will be struck down. Today you can enjoy your Diwali or whatever it is, but this will be struck down by courts. Thank you, madam.
कौशलेंद्र कुमार जी,
2 मिनट
2 minutes only.
आपने मुझे संविधान 124वां संशोधन विधेयक 2019 पर चर्चा में भाग लेने का मौका दिया। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। यह संशोधन सरकार के लिए एक साहसिक और ऐतिहासिक कदम माना जाएगा। कई दशकों से देश के आम जनता के मुख्य मांग रही है कि जब एसी, एसटी, ओबीसी लोगों को आरक्षण मिला है तो जो आर्थिक रूप से पिछड़े हुए सामान्य श्रेणी के लिए भी सरकारी नौकरियों में आरक्षण की व्यवस्था हो। अब यह संविधान के अनुच्छेद 15 और 16 में संशोधन से प्राप्त होने जा रहा है।
It's a fraud on the constitution is what Owaisi just said, but he was talking in parliament, and that debate in Lok Sabha is likely to continue for the next 1 hour, and we'll keep dipping into it. What they're discussing is the quota bill, the government of India introducing in Parliament a 10% quota for economically weaker sections of society. Now, this covers people of all religions, it covers people of all castes. This does not have any mention of caste or religion. It is purely an economic category based on economic criteria. Now, the economic criteria, from what we're given to understand from newspaper news reports so far, is that you would have to have an income, a total family household income of less than 8 lakh rupees. You would have to own a home of less than 1,000 square feet or agricultural land of less than 5 acres. The arguments put forth by several analysts and members of the opposition is that this would cover a large part of the country, given that data suggests that 95% of the population of our country make less than 8 lakh rupees a year. Questions that arise: where is the data? The question that we asked in the previous hour and we haven't received an answer. Does the government know how many jobs, how many seats it's handing out right now in this 10% category, and how many people will fall into that category? What happens, for example, to states where reservation has already crossed the 50% mark? In Tamil Nadu, it is 69%. Will it now, with the addition of this reservation, become 79% total reserved? What happens to the Maratha reservation that the Maharashtra government had already moved, adding another 16% to its already 49%? Will that be over and above this, or will it be subsumed by this 10%? Lots of questions. very few answers. Joining me on the show right now, we have Ashish Sood, spokesperson of the BJP. We'll also have Geeta Luthra, very senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Akash Jindal, senior economist. Radhika Ramsesan, consulting editor of the Business Standard. Yogendra Yadav of Swaraj India will join us as well. Vivek Agnihotri is a retired IS officer, former Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha, very important voice. And Vinay Tiwari continues with us, consulting editor of the Times Network. Vinay, those questions came up in Parliament as well. Where is the data? The government doesn't have empirical data to offer us on what problem this is solving and whether or not it will successfully solve that problem.
Yes, one, the absence of data on the basis of which this criteria was arrived at. There is an absence of that. And then there is also an absence of government data on what is the latest on the employment or the unemployment figures. I mean, clearly the government has that data, but they are not revealing it. And that's part of the problem where you can't analyze the impact that this particular bill, if it gets implemented, or that will have. I mean, there is no way you can actually analyze the impact till you have that kind of numbers with you, which it's not just not available.
The other question we must ask, and that also came up in Parliament, is the reservation that already exists. Now we know, and we're holding in our hands the verdict of the Supreme Court that said you can't in this, you can't cross 50% altogether. There are states that had a reservation before this verdict. Tamil Nadu, for example, which is at 69%. Will that now become 79% is a question we don't have an answer to.
Yes, and for me the most distressing part is that you have a bill of very wide, far-reaching consequences that gets introduced in the Parliament at 12 in the afternoon.
Yes.
The discussion starts at 5 and it will perhaps wrap up by 10. In 5 hours, you actually ended up discussing and ramming through a bill which nobody wants to be seen to be opposing. And the result being that there has been not one substantive argument or speech in the Parliament. I mean, you have rhetorical speeches everybody is making, but you've never really had anyone asking those specific questions, which are plenty in the sense of implementation.
I want you to help me understand, as someone who's watched Parliament for so long, this business of opposition parties standing up, asking questions, saying, we would like the government to have told us this, we would like the government to have given us more time, but we support it. So where does that leave the citizen? Because these are our representatives who are supposed to be asking difficult questions, but they're sort of just letting it go by.
Yes, and the discussion started at 5 p.m. So they ensure that everybody in prime time gets to see that. And that pretty much also puts the opposition on the back foot because they are playing to their galleries. They are not, nobody here is interested in actually giving a substantive for and against this bill. I mean, every party is going there and saying all kinds of rhetorical things against the bill, but they're ultimately going and voting for it because it's all about rhetoric and positioning. It's not about the nuance. It's not about the fact. It's not about data. It's about rhetoric. It's about positioning. We are in election mode. And what you're seeing today is just the beginning of the election campaign for 2019. Every party is now doing campaigning. Unfortunately, that campaigning has begun from Parliament itself.
Well, I want to bring in Radhika ji, consulting editor of the Business Standard. Radhika ji, yesterday, last night on this show, we had a conversation and you said that this seems completely half-baked and is not backed with information. Today, the bill has been tabled before Lok Sabha. They've been talking about it now. It's gone on for 4 hours. Are you more convinced tonight?
Yeah, hi, Fee. What one gathered in the course of conversations with various people in Parliament, including those representing the government, is that it's actually based on a proposal that the UPA government, UPA 2, had toyed with in 2012. It was based on a report by S.K. Sinho, which recommended 10% quota for the economically backward, listing the same criteria that have ostensibly been listed in this bill. But the UPA got cold feet when it remembered what happened to a similar proposal from Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, which the Supreme Court invalidated. So they decided not to go ahead with it. Today, we had Mr. Huda. He was circulating copies of an order that executive order that his government in Haryana, his former government, had passed, giving reservation for Jats. So what you saw today was rhetoric and a good amount of jousting, as if to say that, we had recommended this in our time, we had recommended that, and the BJP should not walk away with the credit. So it was all about scoring brownie points today, instead, as you rightly said, instead of asking pertinent questions. as to, how are you firstly going to implement? Because each state would want to implement it in its own way. How are you going to identify? What are the modalities? I mean, nobody seemed concerned about any of this. It was all about politicking and more politicking. As you rightly said, it seemed like the campaign for the the next Lok Sabha election was unwrapped today before people without really getting any convincing answers. The government, of course, is on this whole trip that this marks a paradigm shift in the whole architecture of quotas. Earlier, it was social and educational backwardness and caste-based reservation for the SCs and STs. This is going to be purely on economic criteria. So, and those who have got quota under the 50% reservation are not entitled to another another quota under this. So this effectively opens up the field for upper castes, and at the rock bottom of all this is the BJP's bid to placate the Marathas in Maharashtra, the Jats in Haryana, Rajasthan, UP, wherever, and the Patels in Gujarat, the intermediate castes. It's also
I must point out here,
it's also about the intermediate castes.
I must point out here that the Marathas in Maharashtra are actually nervous because they don't know whether the the reservation that was offered to them or promised to them by the Maharashtra government will now be part of this 10% that exists for everybody and is a really wide description of category, or will they get a separate category? And Vinay, this is what we were talking about, and I just want to draw your attention to the chart that's on your screen. The red bits that we look at are states where the reservation has already crossed 50%, 68% in some states, 69% in some others, and we don't know whether the 10% we're talking about now will be over and above the existing
yes, and
reservation.
And there are different problems in different states. The realities of Tamil Nadu are different. In Haryana, it's different. In Maharashtra, because the cabinet has already passed a resolution and they're likely to bring it now very soon, that's slightly different. And you rightly said, in fact, the Maratha leaders on our channel have said so, that they would much rather take it under the caste-based system rather than the economic, because that helps them perhaps in their own politics. There is RJD.
They've been asking for the last 24 hours. Nobody's answered
the question. In fact, the RJD has now gone public on that as well. And RJD also is now making this point that you need to now, their argument is that you have 10% reservations for 15% population. Why should then the OBCs not get 90% reservations, because they are proportionally that much more in numbers? So you already have this jostling that has begun, because obviously there is no clarity on how the states are going to go. That's really where the real game is. The game is at the states. It's not really at the central government.
And now let's also remember that the government is hoping to bypass the state assemblies and not have to take their approval for this. But
well,
it is something that
they word bypass only because Mr. Jaitley has made a constitutionally legal argument. Now that argument can be challenged maybe, but his argument is that under 368(2), the sections are not applicable. That's the argument he's making.
Yes, so we'll have to see whether it's legally tenable.
Exception. It could be challenged, I'm presuming.
Radhika ji, you wanted to come in. Go,
no, this is a constitutional amendment bill. It has to be vetted by the states, passed by the states. I mean, there's no way they can bypass that crucial step. I mean, despite what Mr. Jaitley has been saying.
All right, so we will have Geeta Luthra join us through the course of the conversation, and I would like for her to answer that question for us. But we have Vivek Agnihotri, former Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha. Mr. Agnihotri, as a former government officer yourself, having worked in that sector, when you consider this 10% category that's been created, there are a lot of questions that have been asked and not too many that have been answered. Do you believe this is a well-researched, properly framed idea that will solve the problem that the country is currently facing?
Actually, I would like to make a couple of points.
Please.
First thing is that, as has been mentioned earlier, that there has to be data. Because in the Indra Sahani case, where the Supreme Court did not agree to this P.V. Narasimha Rao's proposal of 10% reservation for economically backward people or economically handicapped people. It said that it is possible to make reservation only if, for economically backward, only if there is data that they have inadequate representation inadequate representation is the key word in clause 4 of Article 16. So inadequate representation can only be proved with the help assistance of data. So unless you have data, naturally the legislation will be tested and may be found wanting when it is challenged in the courts. The second point I would like to make is that as has been again mentioned, that in some states there is more than 69%, I mean 50% reservation. And for that a two-pronged strategy was there. Actually this Tamil Nadu reservation came after Indra Sahani. It was in 1993-94, after the 92 Indra Sahani case. And there the court said that two things. One is that act of the Tamil Nadu government was already included in the 9th schedule. It is entry 257A in the 9th schedule. And therefore it is not open to challenge at that point of time. And second point they said was that situation differs from state to state. You cannot have a single yardstick to decide how much reservation will be there in which state, and therefore under extraordinary circumstances, this 50% can be overlooked and it can be exceeded.
Yes. All right, let me ask this question of Ashish Sood. Mr. Sood joins us now, spokesperson of the BJP. Mr. Sood, will the government be able to share data with us right now on, and I asked your colleague Raman Malik in the previous hour, on the number of jobs that will be available under this 10% category, the number of candidates it's likely to attract, and the same thing with seats and applicants?
Together, since the time we adopted reservation, there was a call for this kind of economic criterion for reservation also. Let all these things be finalized by way of this bill, then probably all these things will be made public and will be shared by the process will also be shared.
Mr. Sood,
but at this juncture, we must, all of us should welcome the revolutionary step the government has taken. For 70 years, people have been demanding.
No, but Mr. Sood, how do we welcome a step if we don't have the data and we don't have the details? How do we welcome the step if we don't have the data and the details? And it's been introduced at 12 o'clock. Nobody's seen the details. 24 hours of debate for something so complicated.
Yes. You are free not to welcome it. People can have different views. But at the same time, when one chooses not to welcome it, they must also look into the complex situation the country has been going, the complex caste and other systems the country has. The government of the day, which this continuous rule of 70 years by one particular party could not think and try to find a way to try to crack this whole vicious circle, could not do it.
Mr. Sood,
this government has done. People can choose.
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you, Mr. Sood, that this is a very complex country with very, very complex issues that have actually been compounding over various decades. So is it fair then to assume that such a complicated problem can be solved with one bill that's introduced on the last day of Parliament and then discussed like this shotgun for 4 hours and passed? Is it fair to the citizens?
You must, first of all, we should stop doubting the intentions of the government, because every party sitting in the parliament has put this into in the manifesto. They could not dare to do it.
Forgive me, but doubting is my job. It's what I do. Asking questions and doubting is my job. So I will continue to do that. So, but tell me this. No, it's not about intention. I'm not asking you about intention. I'm asking you about timing. Why was it introduced shotgun on the last day of Parliament? We have members of opposition of the Rajya Sabha saying that as far as the Rajya Sabha website is concerned, there is no Rajya Sabha session tomorrow. And we understand now the Prime Minister is in Lok Sabha. There is no Rajya Sabha session tomorrow, but the Rajya Sabha has been adjourned and extended for another day without consensus with the opposition. Why are we doing this in this manner if it's such a complicated problem that deserves a complicated solution?
With due regards, but all conviction, I would like to put one point in reply to your question. That is, in 2017-18, grand old party of with a standing of 125 years never talked about Patel Arakshan. No one questioned them. Why they are putting this Patel reservation just before the Gujarat elections? No one questioned Manmohan Singh ji in 2009 when 73,000 was doled just before elections.
Okay, Mr. Sood, maybe at that point you were not reading the newspapers, but journalists have existed in this country since pre-independence, and their job has always been to question governments, and they've questioned all governments, including the British Raj at one point. That's where all of our freedom fighters came from. Let me cut back to Lok Sabha, where the debate continues, and we'll come back.
अध्यक्ष महोदय, आज और अभी देश और दुनिया के लिए ये ऐतिहासिक क्षण है कि इस देश में यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी जब पहली बार प्रधानमंत्री बने तो पहला वाक्य था उनकी सरकार गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है, सबका साथ सबका विकास की सरकार है। जो कहा
recently got elected in by-election, first speech, and he has given in writing.
I can't give you more than 2 minutes.
At least you give 10 minutes.
No, not 10 minutes. 2 minutes only.
हम यहाँ से request कर रहे हैं.
2 minutes only. अब बैठिए बोलो. Only 2 minutes, not more than that.
Madam, I am here with the blessings of my party leadership,
yes,
as well as my voters of Ballari constituency, Karnataka. And I am grateful to chair as well as this house for giving this opportunity, madam. Now, we should appreciate this government for introducing this bill in their fag end of their tenure. It appears, madam, for 4.5 years, this government was sleeping like a Kumbhakarna in Ramayana. They won. Madam, if they were so keen, if they were so keen on social justice, they should have brought this bill much earlier, which they have not done. Right, please.
Yes, you go on speaking.
Madam, we have taken a oath. We have taken a oath that we are going to uphold the provisions of the Constitution of India.
Yes.
Preamble advocates that there shall be a social and economic political justice to all the citizens of this country. As there was inequality, Ambedkar had made provisions in the Constitution for SC, ST and OBC at Article 330 to 342 for reservation. Madam, as per Article 340 provides for classification of OBC.
All right, so the debate continues in Lok Sabha, and I just want to point out at the corner of your screen, that's the Prime Minister who has now arrived in Lok Sabha and obviously is going to vote when this does come up for vote, and we'll keep that footage running. We'll keep cutting back to it. Akash Jindal, I see your hand go up. Akash Jindal, we've had conversation after conversation about demonetization and GST and job loss, job creation, all of those things. Now, this is a job reservation. It's very difficult for anyone to decide, and I worry about how Parliament is making this decision without data and evidence.
Oh, very, very interesting, Faye, and I would endorse you up to a lot extent. And in fact, I would love to ask this from my friend from BJP. He's talking about complexities. I have respect for his party. I support his party as far as a reservation for EWS is concerned. But as an economist, I totally fail to understand. For the past 20 years, I've been analyzing incomes and spending habits of people in this country. How a person, a family earning 7,99,000 rupees in a small town of India, how are they called EWS, economically weaker section? I stay in northwest Delhi. Now the plots opposite my society, a 26-meter plot, a 32 square yard plot, costs around 80-85 lakh rupees, a residential plot. And that has 3 houses. So the people staying there, many of them are millionaires, own swanky cars, go for foreign holidays. So here we are talking about 109 square yard. So would they be EWS? So on what basis has this criteria of less than 8 lakh rupees, less than 109 square yard, 1,000 square feet? According to my understanding of Indian economy, these people can be termed as middle class citizen, but EWS. In fact, if I'm not wrong, in 2012, there was a definition of EWS that was perhaps 1 lakh rupees of annual income.
Yes.
So on what basis has this, data come in? Because EWS, if they actually want to help economically weaker section, and I have respect for his party, then perhaps they could have gone for BPL category, below poverty line, or the threshold could have been those people who are not filing income tax returns, who are less than the income tax threshold limit.
Yes.
So 7,99,000, many of the, just allow me 10 more seconds, many of the central government and state government employees would fall under this category. And in some of the cases, many of the fresh MBAs or engineering graduates, they are getting 5 lakh, 6 lakh rupees annual packages. So who all are we getting into EWS categories? I mean, some of the fresh MBAs, some of the fresh engineering graduates, some of the central government employees, state government employees. I mean, so are these all people under the economically weaker section? So I would,
fair enough. So that's a question I'll take to Ashish Sood. Yes. Vinay, and we had this conversation yesterday about the fact that there are now people who pay income tax and who are salaried but are considered poor, and they fall into the category of poor, and we don't know where this, where the category has come from.
Yes, just one caveat to that, because this is a discussion we were having yesterday when we hadn't seen the draft bill, but now that we've seen it, the fact of the matter is this categorization is not there in the bill.
Yes.
This will be perhaps notified separately. It is entirely possible that every state notifies it differently, that they will have the right to fix the income criteria at their level. So it's quite possible that what he's seeing in Northwest Delhi could be different from what you see in Bolangir and Orissa. So that can happen.
Yes.
It's
so
quite
obviously
possible.
the category for Chhattisgarh, for example, is going to have to be different from Maharashtra or Karnataka or Delhi.
See, the problem is the obfuscation, the lack of information is the real problem, because you really can't assess because there's no transparency.
Yes, so that's a fair point. Ashish Sood, do you want to answer that question? Answer the question that Akash Jindal asked.
But with due regards, just 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds. But with due regards, what I need to understand is, in any part of the country, would a family earning 7,99,000 can be considered them economically weaker section? Even in Delhi or Mumbai, can we consider a family who is earning 7,99,000 rupees per annum as
So let me get Ashish Sood to answer that question. Mr. Sood, do you want to answer that question? The category of 8 lakh rupees, a house of 1,000 square foot. I mean, a house at all is a luxury in this country. To own a house of less than 1,000 square feet, how does this at all become economically weaker sections of society?
First of all, when you talk about the criterion and other things, in the bill itself it has been written, for the purpose of this article and the Article 16, economically weaker sections shall be such as may be notified by the states from time to time on the basis of family income and other indicators of economic disadvantage. As I said, we are a very complex society and a very complex country. You cannot have any kind of a criterion pan-India. Let all these things be finalized, then probably the government is coming out with all these details. And moreover, I think this is a reasonable question to be asked. Just let me complete. How could be a 8 lakh earning family could be a economically weaker section? But you are only pinpointing about 8 lakhs. There are many other criterion also. If you are having you may not be earning 8 lakh rupees, as I understand. about the bill, because everything is in the pipeline right now, and you have a house of more than 100 square yards. Then how can you get this benefit? So it is too early to raise questions about all these things. We must appreciate a crackdown, trying to crack down a complex thing and giving benefit and owning and trying to prove that what we say about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is coming true today in Parliament.
No, Mr. Sood, I'm sorry. You've actually contradicted yourself, because you've said it's too early to ask these questions. We don't have the details. This will all be worked out as we go along. And then you say we are serious about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So how do you know this will hold water in front of a court of law?
Yes,
how do you know that anyone has had the time to really examine the details? How do we know that you will actually be able to implement this if you don't have details right now?
Asking Rahul Gandhi why he raised the Patel Arakshan thing just before the election. So it is very easy to raise questions, but a political will to implement its own policy should be appreciated.
Okay. Now, while I appreciate your political will, Mr. Ashish Sood, it is, and I'm going to reiterate like I did in the previous hour, it is my job to ask questions, and I will continue to ask questions. If you choose not to answer them, that's up to you. But we will not stop asking questions.
No one asked. You were never asking questions to Rahul Gandhi.
Because Rahul Gandhi does not run my country. Rahul Gandhi has not formed the government, and Rahul Gandhi is not of any consequence. He doesn't make policy decisions that affect the lives of the citizens of this country. Now, the people who do are in government, but this is a conversation that will take us away from the conversation we want to have. Geeta Luthra.
Modi who has to face the questions.
All right.
Despite the best intentions.
Geeta Luthra. Yes, Vinay?
No, I mean, look, I just wanted to say this. Look, Mr. Sood may not have been in politics in 1993. I was in this profession from 1993. We've seen several governments. All he has to do is to walk across to ITO, where there are several newspaper offices, go to the archives and see what journalists have written about every single government, including the UPA government, which was thrown out because of poor performance in 2014. All the scams from 2G to mining to Commonwealth scam were reported by the very same media that he's running now today. So I can't understand this whole theater about, oh, it was never asked. It was asked, you don't remember it, you haven't seen it. Please go back, do some research, it's all there.
And it was asked because it was not answered.
It's asked to every government. Chandrasekhar was asked same questions when there was a sale of gold reserves were happening. Narasimha Rao was asked questions when liberalization was happening. VP Singh was asked when Mandal was happening. Every single Prime Minister has been asked questions.
All right, let me bring Geeta Luthra into the conversation. Geeta Luthra, very senior advocate. Thank you for joining us. I thank you for your time. A couple of questions about legal aspects of the bill that has been tabled before Lok Sabha. The Finance Minister argued that it needn't be brought before the state assemblies and needn't be ratified by half of the state assemblies. Do you agree with the argument that he put forth, Ms. Luthra?
No, I don't think so. I don't agree. I think it's a major amendment, and I think it needs exactly that in order to be passed and to be approved. This is the first aspect. I don't agree with what the finance minister felt about it. It's not constitutionally correct to my understanding of the constitution. It has far-reaching ramifications and is actually, in a sense, affecting something which is the basic structure. So I feel that we cannot say that it does not need ratification and it doesn't need approval of 2/3 of the majority. So I would feel that this is a subject matter of debate, but I'm very certain that it will not carry the day.
Ms. Luthra, another question to you. The Indra
Swani, my view on the...
Yes, the Indra Swani judgment that basically put a cap of 50% on all reservation. The government is of the opinion that this, this particular bill amendment will stand scrutiny of the courts because it's about class, economic factors, and it's not about caste. So the Indra Swani judgment, which applies only to caste-based reservation, doesn't apply in this case. Again, do you believe that it will stand up in court? This argument would stand up in court?
So apart from Indra Sani, you see, earlier judgment was Balaji, I think, and basically it says reservation cannot be more than 50%. Now, if reservation can't be more than 50%, and if you are not touching the reservation for the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the OBCs, which is already, touching 50%, it can't be more than 50%, so they'll probably try 49.99. For the vote banks, then this will obviously, it's not going to touch that, it's going to be 10%. It's obviously going to be in the way of less than 50% cap. Now you may say that it's for those of the upper classes who are economically weaker, but I think they will all have to fit into this because, firstly, speaking legally and then speaking emotionally. So first, speaking legally, according to me, the cap has to be 50%, and economically weaker can also come in the other backward classes because they are economically weaker. So I feel that therefore the cap of 50% will apply to them. They'll have to come within that 27% which is for the other backward classes. An economically weaker person, even if he belongs to a forward caste, is still coming within other backward classes.
So Ms. Luthra, if I've understood what you're saying, you're basically saying this amendment or this bill will be struck down in a court.
Yes. That's my view. It won't stand scrutiny. It's unless you then juggle around the 27% and bring 10% within that 27%. But at this point, what you are saying is, I'm not going to harm those. I'm going to make sure that the reservation for those will remain. But I'm going to bring in another 10% reservation. That means you are bringing in 60%. That can't happen. So if you bring them within 27%, then you have to adjust the others.
Vinay, I must point out here, do you think any of the political parties, any of the political parties who just said we support this bill, didn't have it scrutinized by a legal mind who told them that this is not going to hold up in court? So they all know, and none of them are asking the questions.
Well, the problem is on all sides, Faye. As I said short while back, the bill gets introduced at 12 in the afternoon. It's being discussed from 5. It will end at 10. 5-hour discussion on a complex issue which requires constitutional amendments. And then you have even when you see the debate right now happening, half the members are not even there. They're sitting in the canteen of the Central Hall. Perhaps they're not even listening to speeches.
It's starting to fill up now, actually.
Now, because I guess the voting is closer, and I guess the Prime Minister has just arrived. So obviously everybody in the BJP would have turned up. But the fact of the matter is that the seriousness can be seen because nobody is making a single substantive point in the Parliament.
Yes, and nobody's even raising a question.
They're not raising these questions.
Absolutely. Yogendra Yadav joins us as well, National President of Swaraj India. Yogendra ji, are you more satisfied tonight than you were yesterday? Because yesterday we were talking about 5 acres of land and 8 lakh rupees salary, but we now understand it's none of those things. It's just an amendment of Article 15 and 16.
No, there's a procedure to it. Step 1 will have to be a constitutional amendment, and constitutional amendment never specifies exact things of 5 acres and 8 lakhs, etc. So the constitutional amendment is here only to open the way, because they know that at the moment only social and educational grounds are admissible. So step 1 is a constitutional amendment which would say economic ground is also admissible. Step 2 will be a law which would say under the new constitutional amendment now we are bringing a law which now specifies this is the kind of limits that we are talking about. So it's only a question of time, step 1 and step 2. To my mind, there is no substantive serious discussion. The only point that Mr. Arun Jaitley has made is that this is unlike the previous attempt. This is a constitutional amendment. Of course it's a constitutional amendment. Of course it's different. But let us not forget that constitutional amendment in this country, and we are one of the few countries of the world where constitutional amendment is also subject to judicial review, which is to say Supreme Court can say you may have amended the constitution, but we don't think it's a good amendment. The Supreme Court has that power under the basic structure of constitution. And from what we know, from what the Supreme Court has said on these questions, they are likely to ask three questions. Number one, does it cross 50%? If it does, they are unlikely to take a very kind view of it. Number two, is economic category by itself admissible? The government would say, now that we've amended the constitution, the word economic has been inserted. The Supreme Court will ask a deeper question. Is inserting economic criteria alone in line with the spirit of social justice and positive discrimination or reverse discrimination that has been done in the country? I heard two former judges of the Supreme Court today, Justice Pathak and Justice Ganguly. Both of them said that this would run foul of this basic structure principle. The third thing that the court is likely to ask is, okay, so here you have, okay, we allow you to do economic, all right, but give us evidence to show that the category for which you wish to provide reservation is a category which has systematically had underrepresentation. This is something the courts have said repeatedly over and over again. And I suspect the government doesn't have an answer to these things. Especially the third one, I would emphasize once again. I would have wanted this government, whenever they propose this definition of the poor, which they have said would be 8 lakhs and so on and so forth, the government has not stepped back from that. That will come only after this amendment is done. But if the definition is 8 lakhs and things of that kind, then the government owes a simple data to the country. Please tell me, what has been the distribution of jobs in the last 10 years or so in the general category? How many candidates from this particular category, what you call poor, below 8 lakh, below 5 acre, how many persons from this background have come? To my mind, as and when this data is revealed, it will show that this category has had 25-30% jobs already, in which case the quota is redundant.
Well, you know, and this keeps coming back to the point we started with, when I no data. And this is a question for you and for Radhika ji as journalists to answer. This whole business of 8 lakhs and, 1,000 square foot house and all of these things was leaked through sources to the press. And leaked, we know, because every single press agency had the same details. Now today, we're hearing completely different things. We're also hearing from legal experts that this is not a bill or an amendment that will stand through scrutiny of the courts at all. Most people are confident that it will never see the light of day and it cannot be implemented. So is it all smoke and, smoke screen and mirror at this point to just make us feel that, oh, there's something coming. Oh, I will qualify for this as well. I should feel good about this. It's never going to show up.
Yes, and the point 3 that Yogendra mentioned is a question that you have put to 4 BJP spokespersons since yesterday, and none of them have any data on it, because obviously they don't want to share the data, because I can't believe the government doesn't have employment on unemployment data. They just don't want it to be shared with people. They haven't released the data for a while. So now this is the main question, and in fact in the previous show, one of the spokesmen said this is an irrelevant question on job data, that why are you diverting the discussion to jobs, because it is really all about that. There is no other argument here at all. So obviously the fact that what you just said is about this, all the arguments are rhetorical in nature. I mean, what Yogendra is asking are substantive questions that will come up in a court of law. But the argument and the discussion in parliament is all rhetorical. Every single party is indulging in a rhetorical debate. There is nothing substantive there at all.
So this is all marketing, there's no product.
It's election campaign. We've kicked off 2019 today, unfortunately, from Delhi.
Yes. All right, we have to, I see your hand up, Akash Jindal, but I understand the Prime Minister has just begun to speak.
Just 30 seconds.
To speak in Lok Sabha, we have to cut to him.
I just want a clarification of Telangana government has passed a act in 2017 for the reservation of 12% Muslims and 10% STs. So I just, if the Pradhan Mantri ji is here, I want a clarification for that. Are you going to...
Sorry. I may inform the House that this being a constitution amendment bill, voting has to be by division. Let the lobbies be cleared. Yes, lobbies clear kare.
Okay, we understand that the Prime Minister is not going to speak, but they are going to vote by division, which means that the lobbies will be cleared. All of the other individuals in the room will have to leave. Only members of Lok Sabha will sit in their assigned spaces, Vinay?
That's right. They're supposed to sit in their assigned seats.
And we have a few minutes before that happens because
it takes a little time. I mean, usually these, this process, though there is only a one-line thing, so it's not as if there are not. It's not an amendment vote, so it's not as if there will be separate repeated votes. There will be just one vote.
Okay, and it's likely to pass because everyone supported. The
most
whips
parties
have
have supported.
most parties have supported it. All right, so Akash Jindal, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is from Sood Saab. Now, this question I'm not asking as a leading economist. I'm asking this question as a citizen of this country, as a voter. Now, this regulation, this bill makes me nervous because as a father, I can realize my son doesn't qualify for reservation under the earlier system. In this 10% also, perhaps he won't qualify. So it makes me nervous whether he'll get admission in any post-graduation college or not. So you are here, the point which I want to raise is you are having here regulations for the general public. Sir, for all politicians with due regards and lot of respect, I want to understand, if they are so convinced about the concept of reservation that nobody is seriously opposing it, how about having reservation for top post in the political parties? If it's such a great idea, why don't you start it with top posts being reserved in political parties? So then all of us would be convinced that reservation, the concept itself is a great idea and we'll all follow it.
Well, if Ashish Sood is going to ask that question, let me add a couple of questions of my own. Ashish Sood, so in Tamil Nadu, for example, where the reservation is 69%, will this 10% be over and above that 69%? And will it now be 79%? My next question to you is, Geeta Luthra was of the opinion, a very senior legal mind, saying that this will not stand up to scrutiny of the court. So if you know this is not going to actually pass, then why are you bringing it through? Last question, Ashish Sood. If up to 8 lakh rupees is poor, then will the income tax bracket be moved? Because why burden the poor? Why should the poor have to pay income tax, Ashish Sood? Go ahead.
Look, all this hypothesis, I think, is on the basis that it will not stand in the court of law and all other things. The finance minister, who himself is an eminent lawyer, has made it amply clear, and we are convinced that the government is on the right track. So the whole hypothesis is on a hypothetical situation that the courts will not do it, and whatever the government is thinking is wrong. So everybody is free to have its own view, but we are convinced the government has done its homework, and what the statement finance minister has made in the parliament will stand. So all of us have been seeing that there has been a demand of this kind of a reservation for years together. So we should wait and see, instead of presuming that this will not happen. This will create doubts among and will further divide the society. So the government has come out with a scheme, with a stand. We are in a free country. We are free to scrutinize everything, but we have to wait and watch till
percent plus 10%, 79%. Ashish Sood, do you have an answer to that question? Are we talking about 79% reservation in some states now?
The 69% itself had some legal issues. We all know about it. At this point of time, when there are so many questions being raised about I would not like to enter into all such hypothetical things.
But nothing is hypothetical. Ashish, if you're talking about hypothetical, it's not hypothetical. It's being discussed in Lok Sabha right now. This could be a reality in the next 24 hours after Rajya Sabha takes a look at it. This is not hypothetical anymore. These are questions that the Indian citizens deserve answers to. This is our jobs you're talking about. These are our college seats you're talking about. How can you not have any details at all? You have no information to offer us.
I very candidly said everybody has a right to to raise questions, but in the problem of a complex
but you won't answer those questions,
the Modi
sir.
Government has
we are asking
taken a
questions, but please answer also,
step to find it.
No, I just want to, if I understand correctly, yes, it is our right to ask questions, but it's also our right as citizens. We are entitled to answers. We're not getting any answers at all. Zero information.
Have not seen the complex situation of the society in the country. Let me complete my answer.
Mr. Sood, if you're going to bring up the complexity of the problem, I would have suggested you start solving the problem 4 years ago. 4 years, 8 months ago when you took power. Why did you bring it on the last day when nobody has time to discuss it?
Just listen to me, Faye. You have put me, you cannot make me answer the way you want. I will answer the way I want. When you talk, when the urban elites talk about
what about my question? Reservation in political parties. Sir, I had asked you a question about reservation in political parties.
They don't understand the complex socio.
No, I'm sorry. I take offense to that. I'm sorry, Mr. Sood. I refuse. You cannot call us urban elite who don't understand the complexity of the country. This is unwarranted, and I refuse to accept it. It's not okay.
Things are very complex.
You can call us anything,
Mr. Sood,
but you are not prepared to listen to my answer.
Mr. Sood, I'm sorry, I usually...
You can call the politicians of the country like anything.
You have not answered. I had asked you.
Mr. Sood, please calm down. If you're not going to answer the questions, then it's fine. Let me involve other members of the panel if Mr. Sood doesn't want to answer the questions. Vinay, go ahead.
Mr. Sood, I rarely get into a...
Have patience.
Mr. Sood, I rarely get into a slanging match with any political spokesperson, but since you made a specific point about us being in the studio urban elites, I don't think you know anything about our background, so please don't make that kind of an allegation. Both of us, and me specifically, we come from a small village in a town called Hardoi, which I hope you heard of it, from a rural background. My village got electricity in 2007. So please don't call us urban elite, just because I'm sitting here speaking in
for
English.
Ashish Sood's benefit, I was born in Chikmagalur, which is tier 3 Karnataka, but they've begun to vote in Lok Sabha, so let's cut across.
No. Yes. Subject to correction, the result of the division is ayes 319, noes 4. The motion is carried by majority of the total membership of the House and by majority of not less than 2/3 of the members present and voting. The House will now take up clause by clause consideration of the bill.
Through Lok Sabha, the ayes had 319 out of 323. The AIADMK walked out right before voting, and 4 noes. We don't know who those 4 noes are just yet, but we'll be able to get you that information in a little while. I'm going to cut across to Radhika Ramsesan, consulting editor of the Business Standard. Radhika ji, unfortunately, we've spent on this channel the last 2 hours asking questions that we have not got a single answer to, not a single piece of clarity since we started 24 hours ago. It has now passed through Lok Sabha. Do you still think this is entirely election gimmickry and this is not a bill that can ever be implemented?
Absolutely. The timing, the absence of data, or shall I say unwillingness to share data, except for very bare-boned kind of things like 8 lakh income and so on, it makes it obvious that this is just another election, gambit. I mean, I wouldn't call it gimmick. I think the BJP is very serious about it. it is really hoping to contain the upper caste support that it had lost in the recent assembly elections. This is, by the way, Kfei, this is not the first revolutionary quote-unquote step that this government has taken. We have had demonetization, GST and so on. And each time a step like that was taken, the spokespersons like Mr. Ashish Sood and the rest of them, they used to be briefed very thoroughly by senior ministers of the government. I mean, I have actually watched the process. The fact that Mr. Ashish Sood is dismissing every question as hypothesis or, an empty kind of query shows that there has been no briefing. And why has there been no briefing? I suspect that the government itself is short on data, and this is something, it's just, it's just something which it has brought in haste, and it will now wait for the states to treat it, interpret it the way they want, to frame rules and so on, if at all it is going to be implemented. But for the moment, it will go to town saying that we've had it passed in the Lok Sabha. Let's see what happens in the Rajya Sabha tomorrow, whether it goes the way of the Triple Talaq bill or whether the Rajya Sabha also passes it. But it has definitely given a kind of a scoring point to the BJP to contain the loss of upper caste and intermediate caste votes.
Yes.
I mean,
well, we have a viewer who's just written to us saying, since they are all up and still working at past 9 o'clock, can they also pass the women's reservation bill while they're at it? But I have a question, my last question for Vivek Agnihotri. Mr. Agnihotri, here's my question. As the former Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the discussion that has taken place today with regards to this very important and crucial amendment to the Constitution?
Well, I think around 4.
Being generous.
4 out of 10.
And why is that, Mr. Agnihotri?
And no, again, let me tell you finally, you see, point is that this amendment is only showing the intention of the government, because its inclusion in the Constitution, I mean amendment to the Constitution, is not going to either provide reservation or provide jobs in the field straight away. As has happened in the case of the reservation, each state government will be free to decide. So whether Tamil Nadu will have 4 or 10, it will depend on what data they have and what they are able to produce. And again, as it has been already said, that all this 8 lakh and 5 acres and all that is hypothetical.
Yes.
And therefore, maybe it will be left to the states to fix their own margin within a broad parameter.
Yes.
So there may be some cases in some Orissa or some place where 8 lakhs is not very high, or I mean some big states, but in other states it may be very high. So the courts have also said in context of reservations that you cannot have a single formula for the whole state, whole country. Each state has a different.
On that point, we're going to have to. I'm going to have to leave it here. I'm going to have to leave it here. But this is where we are. Sabha has passed the quota bill with basically amending Articles 15 and 16 of the Constitution to include economically weaker sections along with socially weaker sections that will have reservations from the government. That's what's happened today. Now tomorrow this bill will be tabled before the Rajya Sabha. It's likely to pass as well, we understand, given the fact that most of the parties, the political parties, have decided that they want to support the bill. So that's where we are at this point. But several problems, no details of how this will work in states where reservation has already crossed 50%. No details of how this will work for reservations already promised by various states, like the state of Maharashtra promised to the Marathas. No details of how this will be implemented, whether or not it will stand scrutiny in a court of law, details of how many jobs we're looking at, how many applicants we're looking at, as the government have any jobs really to offer at this point. What happens in a system where we understand going forward PSU banks, these are the kind of jobs we're talking about, government offices are going to be implementing more and more technology, and you will through good governance remove human intervention and bring more things onto technology and databases and Aadhaar based and things that government is talking about. When you do that, you will reduce the number of government jobs, even squeezing that 10% category even further. So really, what is the data? What is the problem we are trying to solve with this? And will this bill be able to solve that problem? It's very difficult to say because we have no data at this point. We're going to continue to ask questions though, because that is our job. Thanks for watching.